the GigaChad, HooXi, the IGL for G2, after dodging bullet after bullet after bullet, after getting all of his 9 lives that cats have for some reason used up. He's gone. He's been benched. And we're going to talk about what that means, take a deep dive, look at his legacy. There was a kind of a weird thing happening at the moment because I obviously did a couple of videos where I was like critical of Stewie. There was the video where I was like, G2 were deeply unserious to pick him up, and they went on to win Dallas. And after that, obviously, I said, well, HooXi wasn't there. They didn't even have an IGL. They win a tournament, so how can HooXi justify his position anymore? Which then Stewie reacted to, saying I wasn't giving credit to the team because I don't think he understands sentences. Well, or certainly not the way I construct them. We had all that back and forth, and as a result, all of the Stu cells seem to think I'm a HooXi fan. In fact, my video I just put out the other day was spammed with going, how's your HooXi today, dickhead? I'm the original HooXi hater. What are you talking about? I'm the OG HooXi hater. HooXi being out, it couldn't come soon enough for me. He's held back this G2 team for forever. The trophies he won, as we'll get into, I would argue at least one of them is illegitimate. Arguably two. The only one I really think is legit is Cologne. They bombed out one major, didn't qualify for another, didn't qualify for the big one in Brazil. And so I think his tenure as IGL, there's nothing fondly to look back at. And if you're a G2 fan, listen, the memes were good, but talking about him like as if he delivered anything to G2 that any other IGL couldn't is absurd. And we're going to go into that. It is this classic thing that we all do. He seems to be a nice guy, and he had some shit happen in his life, and he handled it with grace and dignity and professionalism. And you look at that and you go, okay, I root for this guy. I like this guy. But unfortunately, being a nice guy, it just doesn't mean shit when it comes to assessing your sporting legacy. And that's what we're in. We're in a sport, whether people want to accept that or not. I know a lot of people like Stu Cells don't want to. But the GigaChad army is going to have to wake up to the fact that ultimately G2 should have had an era with the team that they had. They didn't get one. HooXi should never have had the job in the first place. And when you look at the totality of his legacy, it is beyond disappointing. So first, let's take a look at the news. There it is. HooXi benched in G2. And there he is looking like... I love how they've used a black and white photo. By the way, in esports, when we commemorate people's like careers moving on to the next phase or retirements or whatever, can we stop making it look like they died? Stop making it look like esports players died when they've only just got benched challenge in esports. Impossible. Can we just stop that, right, as a rule? Because I see that all the fucking time. Like, the Malbs video as well. Like, we're going to miss you so much. So many treasured memories. And they're like the fucking Titanic music in the background. And you're like, oh, he's just moved team. He was only on the roster for 11 months. Like, what the fuck? What are we doing? Anyway, rest in peace, HooXi. Gonna miss that guy. And here's the report, obviously, saying that he was benched. Now, just for context, it is worth noting that there was a lot of speculation after Dallas about whether he was going to go or not. We saw that they benched Nexa. Good move. The Nexa move didn't work out. Right, at all. He was not an adequate replacement for JKS, even though I think JKS is massively overrated and outside of the tournaments they won, didn't really do all that much in G2 as well. I know that damn smile, but I have an anti-delusion field around my skull, and your fanboy nonsense can't get into it. So, good news, everyone. Right, so yeah, he's been benched in G2. This is the report. The in-game leader's removal is the second change in the G2 camp in the summer off-season. The organisation replaced Nexa with former M80 up-and-comer Malbs. HooXi's replacement is not yet known. It is, however, likely finalised, given that the roster submission deadline for the upcoming Esports World Cup, where G2 was slated to play, is today. So indeed, they've already made the signing, and as we'll get to, it looks like Launders has memed the perfecto signing shining into reality. A lot of people are saying it's perfecto. Now, listen, I could probably find out. I just don't really care. I don't really care, especially given that the next big CS tournament is the Esports World Cup, and I just won't be watching. I just won't pay any attention to that garbage. It's a shit format anyway, but, you know, I'm not going to watch it for the other obvious reasons. But what this basically says is that they're probably not getting an IGL, if the rumors are to be believed. And if they're not getting an IGL, you know what that means. We're going to run it back with NiKo as the IGL of G2. So, I mean, listen, first of all, I'll just say, as an IGL, HooXi was a solid tier 2 playbook IGL, right? What do I mean by that? I mean somebody that could construct and execute a set of plays, a set of tactics, including, like, you know, rotates, all this stuff, and communicate to players, here's what they have to do. Where G2 seemed to fall down a lot of the time was in the mid rounds. I don't know what was going on there. I don't have any insight into into what happens in the mid rounds, but, you know, very often you would even see them at the end of a round. You would hear HooXi, you know, like saying to somebody, "You've got to communicate," or "You've got to shut up," or "You've got to do this," or "Just listen," or whatever. And it seemed to be that when rounds would break down beyond the initial plan, things would go to shit. People would get stressed and they would flap a little bit. And I never thought G2 was tactically great in the HooXi era. Again, Launders disagrees. He says this is the best ever system that they ever had. I think, personally, had the whole Alexi thing not happened, I think they could have gone on to have achieved more with that lineup. It's just people didn't... his coach basically fucked him over, and maybe some players didn't have the buy-in. But irrespective of all of that, HooXi, for me, was never a top-tier IGL, and ultimately is very replaceable. Now, if it is NiKo going to be the IGL, it's a little bit embarrassing, I guess, to go from being framed as being a tier 1 in-game leader and then being replaced by a guy who, every time he's done it in his career, it's been born out of frustration and it's never worked and it's been a bit of a meme. But as I said on previous videos, I believe that the time is right for NiKo to try being an IGL. He's more mature. He has had a drop-off in CS2 and he gets on very well with this team. He's got, you know, Munacy looks up to him. Obviously, Hunter always had a good relationship there. The fact that they're bringing in Malbs, another young player who obviously is going to look up to NiKo and listen to NiKo. This is actually like the exact kind of roster NiKo can be an effective IGL of. Now, assuming he's going to be tactically sound, then it's got to be a step in the right direction. That, to me, is the what if, because sometimes players can theory craft around the game, but they can't actually express it in a way like an IGL needs to, where everyone has to understand all the moving parts, what happens moment to moment in rounds, what happens. You know, I've talked to IGLs, and basically what they do is they construct, like, you know, a kind of map of, if this happens, you go here, if this happens, you go here, if the opposite happens, go here, and essentially you're making like a decision mind map, and that's what they want their players to do. Some overly micromanage that. You know, like we've heard that about, you know, the Alexi B was meant to be the big, insane micromanager, and it was driving everybody crazy. You know, we've heard that about a few IGLs. Some don't do it. They do a play, you know, at the start of a round, maybe a mid-round call, depending on whether it works or not, and that's it. So everyone's got different styles, and I don't know what NiKo's is going to be. So, with all of that said and done, let's take a look at the farewell video.
My name is HooXi, and HooXi. I'm applying for the IGL role.
It's the end of an era.
HooXi, me, without Frank Dong at the major.
Kinder though, up connects, HooXi!
Now, by the way, they must have had to work really hard to get these highlights. Like, credit to the team. It must have took them ages to actually find, like, vaguely impressive plays. So, I mean, credit to them.
Nice little spray.
That was good.
Oh, it's HooXi's world.
As he peak eventually starts to look up. Can he find the angles? Big steps the wrong way. HooXi.
The fact is running out of bullets down to the clock now. Shotgun mode for HooXi.
It's HooXi versus
I think that was
Nitro.
unironically his best play as well.
And Nitro, well, he's just waiting for the fight him in the open. For HooXi. He's deep behind enemy lines here, fighting for it and holding on. A whole lot coming our way, and it's a shooting gallery for HooXi.
Remember, he's not dead. He's not dead. Right, well, esports is never going to stop being cringe then, right? Like, I think we can agree with that. So, I mean, look, I'll just give my thoughts about HooXi in general, and then we're going to take a look at his legacy and what he actually achieved. But these are my opinions, and I'll preface them by saying, obviously met HooXi in person, great guy. Outside of the server, great guy. Met him at the major, very kind towards me, very gracious in the criticism that obviously I've given him his entire Tier 1 career, and it seems to be a very mature, nice guy. Love to get a beer with him, you know, one of those. But I think a complete prick on the server, and related to how he deflected the criticism as a professional, I could never get on board with it because, you know, I saw a guy who was clearly not up to Tier 1 standard aim-wise, and for me, not up to a Tier 1 standard as an IGL either. And yet, every time he was criticized, he would come out and say, if you criticize me, you don't understand the game. And I'm going, well, you know, that might work for the pleb fans, but analysts are criticizing you. People like Maniac are criticizing you. People like Casada are criticizing you. Are you going to say they don't understand the game? And he did. He went on to a fucking desk post-match, stood next to Kassad and basically said, you know, you don't know what you're talking about, essentially. And I never fucked with that. And by the way, this is a scene where if another player had said something like that, if Nico had said something like that, for instance, there would be hate threads about him every day. If Cadian had said something like that, it would be front page. What an arrogant piece of shit. But no, because it was the GigaChad with the GigaChad army, he largely got away with basically creating a quantum argument where only his opinion about his play counted, and anyone else who criticized him or even observed facets of his game that weren't great, they just didn't understand it. He meant to do everything he did, even the things that he did wrong. So I could never get on board with that. That always seemed to be a bridge too far for me. And I'll also add, he should never have had the job in the first place. One thing I do feel deeply sorry for him is all of the pressure, all of the scrutiny, you know, which I've contributed towards, obviously in my capacity as a pundit. It must have been really hard for him. Like, I can't even begin to imagine how difficult it must have been to be an IGL, a maligned IGL, arguably the biggest org in the world. Like, it must have been really fucking hard. And you know, he should never have had that pressure, because he should never have had that job. He was talked into it because everyone was circle jerking around Copenhagen Flames. He seemed to be an affable guy, and G2 were desperate to bring in an IGL because, you know, they just got rid of Alexi. That had been a bit of a, you know, failure. And so they said, fuck it, we'll roll the dice on HooXi. And Reddit, well, we're all like, yeah, this is great. He just like me, for real, he shit at the game. The GigaChad. And, you know, this whole time, it was a travesty. It was a travesty. It should never have happened. But as I said, I do recognize it must have been incredibly difficult to kind of power through. These were HooXi's words as well on the way out. Been one hell of a ride the past 2 years, and at the end we ticked off a few big boxes on the bucket list. I will forever be grateful for the chance I got to prove myself. It has given and gotten me through the best and worst times of my life so far, both in real life and in game. The biggest virtual hug and thank you to the G2 Army. Despite how toxic this community can be, you guys kept my spirits up a lot of times, and to everyone else that have crossed my path in the past 2 years in G2, thank you for everything, especially Hunter, Nico, and Munacy, who have been there through thick and thin. GigaChad out. So that's nice, that's a nice farewell to the fans, and obviously acknowledging, the G2 guys, they did talk me up. Now, he's kind of not telling the full story, because every time they lost or failed and people were going, does HooXi have a job anymore? If so, why? People, like the G2 fans would be like, why is Nico doing this? Choco? Like actual people with G2 flair. Oh yeah, let's kick another IGL so Nico can get away with it. And I'm like, what? And you have to also understand, this spanned across 2 games. The end of CSGO, the start of CS2. He didn't win a trophy in CS2. He won 3 in CSGO. One of them is beyond Mickey Mouse. 2 maybe legit, but again, we're going to look at those closely. And did this, by the way, all while having arguably the best player at the end of CSGO, certainly one of them, with a young phenom, and having the best player in CS2. Didn't achieve more, and I think it's an indictment. I really do. We'll look at the actual achievement. You can see for yourself just how not great it actually is, and how, I've seen a lot of people talk about how the Team Liquid Grand Slam team is one of the most overrated because they achieved their success in a relatively short period of time. They only had to be good for a short period of time, and they had a huge mental block when it came to beating Astralis and that kind of thing. Well, if you actually look at the part of time that G2 was actually successful, it's nothing. It's a fucking mustard burp. It's like, it's just there and it's gone. So let's start, right? This is obviously when he comes into G2. And you can see, we're not going to go into all of the individual bits of the groups. This was the ESL Pro League season where they were like, oh, okay, this could be like, this team could be decent. They could have like a decent showing here. They finished like third to fourth. You can see here, down there, joint with Cloud9. It was it was a pretty legit run. They lost the vitality in the end. And this is where you were looking at it going, okay, they might have some potential. I think the way the ESL Pro League is constructed is it's a slog. It's very attritional. And I think having deep runs in this and getting like legit top 8, top 4 placements in a pro league, I think that's a legitimate result. It's very, very difficult. You're playing a bunch of no-namers that you don't know, you've never played them, you don't prep for. Upsets can happen. You then go through, and generally you're up against a pretty strong, top 10, top 12, top 16, teams in the world. Very rare you see any of the kind of lesser teams advance. And so, yeah, I think this was legit. So, they started out super promising. But then you go, okay, well... Oh, and it's worth noting that, by the way, this top 8 at Antwerp, Copenhagen Flames, this is what gets him the G2 job. Everybody seems to think that this was, like, insane. That finishing top 8 with Copenhagen Flames was, like, some sort of insane result. And it's like, it's aight. Like, in retrospect, when you look at the team he did it with, you think about, like, what Jabby went on to do and, like, how Zyphon was, like, meant to be the next Danish talent, was performing really well there. Roy was an unplayable, like, entry fragger. Like, and you look what happened to all of their careers since, it's like, kind of feels like a flash in a pan kind of thing. And there's always one team in the top 8 that kind of like don't really belong there, and everybody knows it, unless we're talking about Paris, in which case it's like 50% of the teams shouldn't have been there if the scene was functional in any way, shape or form. But listen, I'll take it. He was up there with that NIP was deemed top 8. It's kind of like, Furia, And obviously, you know, best of ones in the format. I don't know. But okay, fair enough. Like top 8, I guess that top 8 with Copenhagen Flames is also a legit result. But anyway, that's what gets him the G2 job, so it's worth pointing that out. Anyway, we then have the disaster that was the Road to Rio European RMR. It was inconceivable that they couldn't get to Rio. I mean, inconceivable. And remember, everyone was billing this as it was going to be the biggest major of all time. You know, it was going to be like, oh, wait till you see the crowd. Think of the exposure you're going to get in Brazil. And then obviously it was dog shit. And it was just Gaules electioneering, or whatever the fuck he was doing, saying this event is just for Brazilian people. Fuck the rest of the world. Saying that at an official Valve partnered event, very cool. And obviously the fans didn't even turn up for any of the teams that were there. But I mean, look, to put it in context, here you go. They lost to Cloud9, 1 win, and quite famously from this stream, Gamer Legion. When I say Gamer, you say Legion. Gamer, right? One of the worst named orgs in the world right now. So these results were dog shit. Remember, they didn't just go out. It wasn't like some nightmarish, like 2-3 scenario where they got really unlucky with the drugs. We all know how the RMRs suck. No, I mean, they got given gifts. You know, they got to play Ecstatic, they got to play Cloud9, they got to play 1 win, and they got to play Gamer Legion. Like, at the end of the day, this is unjustifiable. He should have been kicked then, right? This is 100%. If you're an IGL, this is where you go. It's indefensible. And a major is worth millions. A major is worth millions to the org, millions to the players. It's why they all cry when they qualify. It's why they cry when they don't. It's just about stickers. It's just about money. And so this is a catastrophic decision, or result rather, for G2. And their decision not to kick him is inexplicable. You might say, oh, well, you know, it's hardly been any time at all. But, I mean, strange things have happened, right? I've seen people kicked after like 2-3 months before. But no, they said we're going to roll the dice again. Then their follow-up, they go to the fall finals. Keep in mind, we're getting into the period of time where the scene just fucking sucks, right? And everyone's just shit. And these blast tournaments, I've had pro players and coaches literally say to me they were using these as practice. And then you look at who was here, and this is where they finish 5th to 6th. So not even on the podium at this one. And you look at what we had. Fluxo, who I wish Maui was here just to chime in and just say the most catastrophic dog shit team he's ever seen play CS. You've got NIP, again, with this is when Brolan was barely a player, fucking price tag, Rez, who was toast. You had OG, fucking lol, Nitro, OC, Yakindar, Liquid. And so, I mean, you can see him, and by the way, the heavily conflicted Na'Vi, which had a schism in the team because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So, G2 come out the gate and just lose to Heroic. See, yeah, that was that. So, this was embarrassing, but I don't count these tournaments, really. It's just for people saying, oh, we won all these trophies. Yeah, you're going to count the exact same event just a little bit later. Because the fall finals and the world final for Blast are completely just indistinguishable from each other. So let's get to that. Right, they're in the world finals. This, by the way, is supposedly an S-tier event. I don't understand it, but whatever. Again, look who's here. It's the conflicted Na'Vi. This is Heroic with Config as a stand-in, right? Because this is also the stand-in era of CSGO, where you couldn't go to a tournament without somebody using a fucking substitute. Virtus Pro didn't qualify. Some young, plucky upstart org called Outsiders were there. Still rocking the Nitro era, Liquid. OG again. So, you know, realistically, there's like FaZe, Vitality. And yeah, they won it. Well done. You beat Vitality. You beat FaZe. And then you beat Liquid in the final. This is a legit run. Well done. Well done. But it's a pretty fucking weak field overall. It's a pretty weak tournament. You beat the best teams there. And so everyone's like, wait, HooXi's got one. Is there anything else that's remarkable about the Blast Premier World Final? Is there anything else that's remarkable about it? I'll tell you, it's the date. Big feature of HooXi's career. Happens on the 18th of December, right? It was the last tournament of the year. Now, I'll also just say, okay, he had some personal shit happen in his life, quite, major stuff. And he handled it with dignity, as I said earlier, and won a tournament. And that's gangster shit. But let's also be real. This was the 18th of December. There wasn't another tournament until the end of January that you can see, right? And teams were already making roster moves. Like, teams had already checked out. They were all ready for the player break. Certain players were going, and not certain rosters, they knew they weren't sticking around. So this is like a feature of his career, that when all the other teams are either coming back from a break or going on a break, and so teams are either making new teams or killing off old ones, that's when G2 wins. And that context never gets brought up. They never talk about it on the desk. It's like, context just doesn't matter. It's like, by the way, like, imagine a world like right now, I'm watching the Euros. That's another reason why I haven't been streaming very much, despite doing my classic pledge to stream more in June. But I totally forgot the Euros were on. And I've said, I'm not going to watch them, who cares? And then I've been watching them, haven't I? It's like, look at this England team, right? And think about how shit they have played. Think about how they were seconds from elimination against Slovakia at the time of recording this, with like a golden generation of talent, right? And terrible in the groups, even though they somehow topped the groups. I think they're on 3 wins out of the last 9 games, despite having like some of the best players in the world right now. And if they go all the way and win the tournament, no one's going to talk about the group stage. No one's going to talk about nearly being eliminated by Slovakia. Everyone's just going to be singing, "It's coming home," and no one's ever going to talk about the context. I'll remember the context. I think the context matters. I think the fact that they've played diabolically bad football and have been given a gift of a bracket, because their next game's like Switzerland, and it's a national embarrassment if they lose that one as well. But guess what? They'll play shit and then win in extra time, probably. It'll be something like that. It's like, everyone's going to herald Southgate as a good manager, and he's not. He's just a rat-human hybrid dickhead who, should have been fired for all the ridiculous things he said in the press, not least of all for wasting, some of the best players like England have ever had. Anyway, so I think context matters. Now we get into 2023. As I said, everyone's coming back from a break, and we go into Katowice. When they won Katowice, everyone was like, "This is it. Richard was wrong. He said they were never going to win anything, and they've just won Katowice, one of the biggest and best tournaments of all time. That smile, that damn smile. What about today, dickhead?" That's what they said. You were all there. It didn't matter that I'd said all of this before they failed to qualify for Rio, and I was like, once again, I was right, but time is linear. So it's like, if you say something and then you're right, 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 and then you're wrong, it's like, what about the rights, though? People don't understand dickhead magic. They never got it. So anyway, this was their run. And you can see in their group, they had to beat Big, lol, right? I mean, are big a real team? Like, okay, right? Then they did it over FaZe again, okay? Legit. This Na'Vi, by the way, right? Still the fucking nipple conflicted Na'Vi that had internal problems and external problems as well, right? They beat them, okay? And then we get down into the playoffs and they beat Outsiders. All the rounds. God, I'm so glad we don't have that MR15 anymore. They beat Liquid. Again, just a reminder, this was still the Nitro, Daps coached, Yakindar, OC, Elige Team Liquid, right? So obviously they beat them. And then they had Heroic in a best-of-5 final. Heroic, notorious chokers, never getting over the finish line. And this was when I believe Heroic I think they were the number 1 team in the world, despite the fact that they were notorious chokers. So listen, all things said, you can't criticize that all that much. Context, JKS played out of his fucking mind at this tournament. In fact, I almost want to bring up the stats, right, just to show you how ridiculous it was. These stats here are the argument for why JKS is apparently the best. He's one of the best players in the world, the greatest. This is what we all come back to. Because look, right, JKS 1.24 rating across 12 maps with a plus 58 kill differential, right? Hunter 1.21, he was the MVP because of what he did in the final, if memory serves me correct, with a plus 58 kill differential. A lot of people say JKS was the MVP of this event, I believe, but no, he wasn't. Nico 1.17 plus 24 kill differential. Munacy 1.14 plus 40 kill differential. Like, the entire fucking core popped off. And then, where are you, HooXi? There you are. Playing to the HooXi line, 0.91. Getting carried like a motherfucker. Still better than Config. Fuck you forever. But there's HooXi there. Right? So, I mean, yeah, of course they win this fucking tournament. I mean, you can even make an argument, 0.91 for HooXi back in old CSGO, MR15. That's like a life game for that motherfucker. So, of course they won. Everybody popped off. So, okay, cool. Now, riddle me this. If that's the norm, if that's what all those players are capable of, why didn't it last? What do you mean, Richard? People can't perform like that all the time. Well, that's interesting, because there's a word for when people overperform and it's a statistical aberration and not the norm. But we never use that word to talk about these results. And the reason for that is because it happens again at another big tournament, doesn't it? So, right, we've had back-to-back, I mean, I don't want to call Blast a big tournament, but back-to-back big tournaments, right? Let's just say it, S-tier. They're S-tier in Liquipedia, that's all that counts. What happens next? They go to Pro League. 9th to 12th? Huh? Nani? Why? How? You've just won Katowice. Like, how does this happen? And people literally turned around and said, it's just a Pro League. They're probably a bit burnt out. You've just come back from a fucking player break. What it was, teams were starting to get their fucking shit together. Except Evil Geniuses. So, then we have the RMR to get in for the last CSGO major, which is Paris. They squeaked through here, right, in 5th, with a 3-1. They lost to fucking 9-1. They had to play, I mean, this is what I mean. I never want to hear that the RMRs were good ever again, by the way, right? Like, moving away from the RMRs, good thing. The RMRs were a good idea, dog shit execution. So they lose to 9-9. They beat the might of iNation, Aurora Gaming, and okay, you did 2-0 Cloud9 with Buster, who makes me feel good. But then they go to the major itself. Womp womp. It is a quack oops. They lose to Vitality. They lose to Bad News fucking Eagles. They beat Furia, which, you know, I think everybody was fucking doing that at that moment in time. Yeah, they're the 0-3. And they lost to Fnatic, right? They lost to that Fnatic. They lost to the Fnatic with Old Man Crims, Mezzy, Nikados, Roy, and Fasha. Like, right, let's just... that squad there, okay? And this squad here. It's bonkers, guys. So again, at this point, surely he's got to go, Wobby. He's got to go, right? It's fucking 12th to 14th. But people were so like, CS2's coming anyway. So who gives a fuck? So after crashing out at the major, you get just a run of really mediocre results, like semi-finals and 5th to 6th. You know, just they had this 5th to 8th again at Pro League. Just not good. The never-ending Pro League. Let's talk about the Cologne that they won. This, again, I'll just point out, remarkable for the date, because the player break happened in June. People came back did the blast 23rd of July. No one gave a fuck. Right? And then they went into Cologne. It was August. And by the way, people were just playing CS2. Like, people were just playing CS2. Everyone was getting ready for the new game. So, once again, fucking player break comes to HooXi's fucking legacy, that and the new game. And it's like, all right. This is the most legit of all the tournament wins, in my opinion. Because they had to beat... they beat like Astralis, they beat FaZe again, they beat Vitality, then they beat Astralis again, and then they beat Ents in a best of 5. It's the most legit of all of HooXi's trophy wins. So, I wonder if there's anything remarkable about the statistics. Oh, yeah! Yeah, this is the tournament when Nico and Munisi were just fucking the Destructo brothers. They just absolutely fucking owned everybody. When's the last time you've seen, like, Zywoo, like, 4th on a player stat table? I mean, more often than not now. But, like, they were just fucking unplayable, right? And when you consider, like, Hunter's here, JKS is, like, doing his... Still, that is, like, above average for him. So you win a tournament. Of course you do. Like, and as I said... For me, the great failure on this is that you cannot say they were performing so well because of the system. Why? Because these were anomalies. If it was HooXi's system, which again, Reddit was going, Munisi is playing so well because HooXi is an IGL, understands. The people were so fucking mental on the HooXi train, they were taking credit away from Munisi and saying it was HooXi. HooXi was the reason why the best player in CS2 was playing good at the end of CSGO. It was HooXi. Right? People literally were saying that. So, absolute crazy. Just craziness. They had like... They had this in Sydney. Remember, this is when... Oh, guys, Tier 1 has changed now. Gamer Legion, Apex, Monty, Bet Boom. These are the new Tier 1 guys. Get used to it. How did that fucking take work out, Reddit? Fucking cretins. The scene has just changed. Get used to it, guys. Yeah, all right. Look at this. Right? 13-11 against Greyhound. Shit, it's mental. I even remember watching that game. Right? Like, people thought, yeah, it's a best of 1, but people thought, like, Greyhound might beat G2. Like, just straight up at the opener. Then, right? Comfortable against Complexity. You should be beating Complexity all day long. They beat Ents as well. Now, remember, it's this Ents, right? This was the Ents that, like, oh, and then it got broke apart and scattered to the 4 winds. But it's like... I mean, it's hardly like a fucking mega run, is it? And then, whop, whop, you lose to Complexity. What? And then, obviously, in the run-up, you can see all of these, like, near misses. And I've got to talk about the major I was at. People who remember the broadcast, because I was hosting this one, wasn't I? It was back in the game. Copenhagen. There I am. Look at me. He's been doing it for 11 years now. That's longevity, right? So anyway, we're in the CS2 era now. This one, I thought we were going to see the fucking win. I was so convinced because if you remember, and I think people are kind of trying to forget about it a little bit. And they definitely shouldn't. G2 would have been toast if it wasn't for this game. The 2-1 against Virtus Pro, where the Jane crashing won HooXi basically a few more months of his career, right? And so we had this NVIDIA bug in a key round. They were 100% saving. HooXi had already called it. We heard it on comms. He said, if we get a kill, we're going to go. And the kill was Jame had, like, lagged out. And he whiffed a full clip into James' back. Now, I have put it this way. I've seen a lot of crashes and a lot of esports, and, that I've covered down the years. And I don't think I've ever seen, okay, maybe one or two, but like, this is like top 5 most impactful game bugs / crashes I've seen in 20 years of esports coverage, right? And basically, they won because of that. And I thought HooXi handled it terribly. I remember I was actually a bit triggered on the desk, because where the desk was, before we moved to the stadium, we were right opposite the players. And so at the end of the round, Hila was like DXing, like woo, woo. Sorry, at the end of the map, he was DXing. But the thing is, they knew it was a bug, because after he'd whiffed the spray and then finally they got the kill and they won that round, there was a tech pause straight after it. And so people were going, "Oh, you can't be mad at HooXi for screaming." Well, put it this way, I'm gonna just say this: I don't have a problem with trash talk. I think the community's too sensitive about it. I don't have a problem with shouting or screaming or going woo. I always thought it was a bit stupid that HooXi was doing it, but whatever. I mean, yeah, you're 0.8 for the game. You're 5 and 14 or whatever, and you're the one screaming while Nico's got 30 kills. Like, I don't know, but whatever. Right? So, fine. But doing it in this instance, I thought was really poor taste and real bad sportsmanship. Whereas Jane did a really masterful interview at the end and was like, these things happen, don't be mad. I might seem calm on the outside, but I'm upset inside. But, credit to G2, they were the better team, blah, blah, blah. The contrast between the two just couldn't have been any more. So anyway, this motherfucker had literal divine intervention to extend his career. Like, I have never seen it. Because remember, if they didn't go through to the stadium, 100% he is out of this team. 100%. It was done. So they get through and they get Mouse. And what happens in this game? Oh yeah, the stage invasion happens, and the Mouse players were fucking shook. They were shook. So they never bounced back from this. These are, by the way, these were players that had problems with stage fright anyway. And I won't name names, but at least one of them was physically in tears. And they had to sit down and play. And they were literally crying. Oh, so you beat them. Well done. You beat the crying kids who were shook to fuck because of the crazies. And then you go up against Na'Vi, right? There for the taking. I mean, history has shown us that. And they did the craziest veto that they possibly could have done. And it was such a bad veto. Taz has to come out afterwards and go, it was all me. By the way, I know Taz. I've never talked to him about it because he'd lie to me anyway. Because that's just, he's a good guy and he'll go to the wall for his teammates. He's always been like that. So I know he wouldn't tell me the truth, but that to me was like, so wait, HooXi has nothing to do with the vetoes as well? Huh, that's pretty crazy. So they go out, they should have been in the final, and given what we know, G2 probably would have won the major. Like, you had God come down from the heavens and give you 2 best of 3s. No other org, no other team can ever say that. Like, divine intervention once, that's mental. Divine intervention twice at the same tournament. How the fuck do you not win it? And so anyway, they get back from Copenhagen, and I mean, just bleh. They lose to Mouse. They lose to Mouse because Mouse Larpin is the best team in the world right now. 5th to 8th at the Pro League. And then we had the Blast Premier Spring Final. Now, let's do, because remember, I defended him coming out of the major. I said, listen, HooXi wasn't the problem. The veto, if it's not him, you put that on the coach, right? But, I mean, you can't even make any sort of statistical defense for the existence of the player, but in a tier 1 team. But right here's his last event. Like, for me, I think he knew he was going, and I just think he was fully checked the fuck out. He went to his sister's wedding. They win in Dallas, and that he knew. And to just turn up and like just go through the motions, like it was ridiculous. I just don't know what to say. Like, I don't know what to say about that. So that was the end of the GigaChad. That was him having to go. And it's like, you can't defend it. You can't defend it. You can't defend it as being like, oh, he should have had extra time, or, you know, he was really, really good. No. I hate it. Guys, like, this is it. Now, the question is, where does he go next? And I think Reddit and HLTV forums are like, well, HLTV forums, it's obviously bait, right? But Reddit, there's people saying like, oh, maybe he'll go to Team Liquid. Like, guys, he will never, right, unless something goes drastically wrong, he will never play at Tier 1 again. He can't. There is no justification for it, guys. There's no justification for it. He cannot be justified in any way, shape, or form. He's not up to it from a fragging perspective. He's not up to it from a tactical perspective. I hope he makes a great team with some friends, you know, helps out some young Danes or whatever it's going to be next, or, you know, something like a project like, you know, Ecstatic, or if they, I don't even know if they're still around after the changes to the qualifying for the major. But yeah, it seems, it's just ridiculous. So here is his legacy. He won a bunch of trophies when he had 4 players popping off and other teams weren't so great in one of the weakest eras of CSGO, never won a trophy in CS2 despite having one of the best squads and the best player of 2024 so far. And the team remarkably improved for the one tournament he sat out, to the point that they won it with a player who hadn't played competitive CS in 2 years. I think, listen, nice guy, cool, but anyone trying to recontextualize his contribution to G2, to Counter-Strike, frame him as a great IGL, you're out of your fucking mind. And that shit will never be said round these parts.